I have been asked by many people to talk about a weird little show called One, but I've been pretty hesitant to cover it for a while. Don't get me wrong, it's a very interesting show, but I was always so bewildered by it. It's just so bizarre. When I think about it, it's always so hard to talk about it. I find it difficult to know where to start with this show. It's a pretty disturbing show at points, but it feels oddly calm at points, and yet it has a faint sense of uneasiness to it the whole way through. It's very unique, I'll give it that, and watching it is surprisingly engaging. But it's not perfect, and I want to talk about what it could do better. But first, I want to go over what the show does right, because it absolutely does some things right. One of them being the atmosphere. The show pulls off a faint sense of eeriness throughout it. I think a large reason as to why it maintains this atmosphere so well is because it always has the characters trying to logically react to the illogical. That's where some of the more disturbing moments in the show come from. Since the people introduced in this show are really humanized, watching them react to the completely bizarre and nonsensical situation they find themselves in sets up its disturbing atmosphere really well. The humor is another thing this show uses to display its disturbing atmosphere. I'd say the humor is pretty minimal, but whenever it is used, it definitely fits with the rest of the show. The jokes are pretty quiet and quick. There's also a good amount of dark humor. It never feels like the show forces a joke for something like cutting the tension of a scene. It all feels really natural, and I can respect that. While not all the jokes are particularly funny to me, there are some pretty clever ones in there. The show is pretty quiet, but it can make me feel confused and helpless when watching it. The show gives you a constant sense of unease throughout it.
Even when something purely disturbing isn't happening, watching can be oddly disquieting, and that's mostly because of how effective the theming is. The contestants trying to logically react to the illogical and the oddball humor are both big reasons for that, but another large reason as to why it's so effective is the soundtrack.
The show's soundtrack has some really nice tunes and melodies. Lots of them are really pleasant. Many of the nice tracks fit really well with the show's serene moments, but there are also some very disorienting ones for the more disturbing moments. For instance, the track you're hearing right now is called Spow. The repetitive jingles and odd notes are very off-putting. That may sound like a bad thing, but the disturbing music only works in the show's favor. The repetition and the bizarre notes in these tracks further emphasize the disturbing nature of the show. They might be somewhat ear sores, but they're intentional ear sores, and they work really well. You would think that the disturbing nature of the show would make me want to just ignore the more soothing moments, especially since I said that I somewhat enjoyed the disturbing moments. But no, in fact, I feel like the disturbing moments make me appreciate the serene moments much more. It makes them feel more effective, like these characters may be in a terrible situation and they've experienced some horrible things, but they still manage to have some wholesome moments with each other. These moments may not be frequent, but that just makes them feel rare and in turn more special to the characters. And because of that, these moments feel more special to me. That's why I started to cherish these moments more and more as the show went on. Surprisingly, another thing I like about this show is its animation, which is funny to me because when I first watched the show, I wasn't a big fan of the art style. It just looked kind of plain to me. The animation isn't really anything super impressive, but I really can't imagine this show with any other style. The characters' movements are choppy and quick, but they're quaint. Everyone's faces are simple yet expressive. Everything looks kind of bizarre, just like the show, and it grew on me the more I watched it. It feels perfect for what the show is meant to be. I also love how physics are animated with all the inanimate objects. Many things move very fluently and realistically. This bicycle wiggles around and loses its balance before falling like a real bicycle. These post-it notes slowly float down and rock back and forth in the air like real paper. Senti's dead body shatters into pieces like real glass. Even more supernatural things in the show have a realistic fluidity to them. This art style surprisingly does a lot more to affect the show than I thought. It might not look stunning, but I have a very big appreciation for it. To me, those are the show's best qualities. So far, I'd say the show is eerily atmospheric, slow-paced, and has some great music with some very fitting animation. But this is where we start to go a little downhill. In my opinion, it's pretty hard to have a good story without good characters. And some of the characters in the show are actually pretty solid. They're not the most interesting and layered characters in the world, but they do feel like real people, and they're unique enough for them to feel like different individuals. Backpack is stoic, soft-spoken, and keeps to himself a lot. Soda Bottle is relatively easygoing, but is easily frustrated. Senti is zen and speculative, but can get really emotional. Moldy is athletic and prideful, but is quick to anger. Magazine is naive, excitable, and can become very frightened. Tomato isn't the most layered character, but he is a literal baby, so I'll give him a pass. So yeah, these starting characters are pretty good. good. My problem resides with the new characters. These guys are inanimate objects that were given consciousness and put into Aries' game show.
6 of them are introduced in episode 2, and 6 more of them are introduced in episode 3.
And since only one contestant gets eliminated every challenge, their inclusion would make the game go on a lot longer since it only ends when there's one contestant remaining. I'm guessing that they were also added to incorporate more character variety in the cast. But to put it frankly, these new characters are not nearly as unique as the first 5 when it comes to personality. Now, that doesn't go for all of them. Folder is a strange robot guy that can be pretty funny at times. His animations are also just spot on. He feels like he's straight from an old school computer. Abstracty is a strange polygonal being that mirrors and describes anyone it sees. And Stone is a mute, mysterious, anxious, and knowledgeable guy who isn't good with people. Those are honestly the only characters with unique personalities that I can think of. But even then, Folder and Abstracty aren't much characters, it's just that the way that they behave is unique compared to everyone else. They're not really personalities, they don't act like characters, they're more like gimmicks. And Stone is supposed to be a strange anomaly in the show, plus he's only in 2 episodes because he's quickly eliminated. Any other memorable characters are only memorable to me because of their designs. Characters like Texty, Adam, and Subway Seat are kinda just nothing to me. It's really hard to list off any of the new contestants' character traits. Oh, there's Trey, good old Trey, you know, Trey, she's happy. It's kind of fun to watch these characters mess around with their weird designs, but if they had normal human bodies, they'd kind of just be hunks of nothing to me. I guess they do act like people, they engage in conversations, but they would be the most boring people ever. However, one could argue that this was the point. After all, they were included to lengthen the show and keep some of the remaining 5 contestants for a longer amount of time. Maybe having characters that are meant to fill up space ties in with how long the show's gonna go on for and how it's driving the remaining first 5 characters insane. It could feed into a theme of loneliness and how even though there are other contestants around the main 5, they can't make friends with them because they're just so empty. It could ultimately add to the disturbing nature of the show. Okay, that sounds like a great idea. But then why not go all the way with that? Why not have all the new characters be lifeless and static? That would add to the disturbing nature of the show. Maybe have them be lifeless in unique ways, like with Folder and Abstracty. Those guys are so weird that they're almost disturbing. They can't be related to. Can you imagine what that would be like? The main 5 are just surrounded by bizarre beings with no one else but each other? That would get me so attached to the characters, watching them trying to survive, trying to get back home. But instead, we get a bunch of characters that are just kinda lifeless. They strike a weird in-between. They are pretty boring, but some of them have normal interactions with the main 5. They have normal conversations with them, and Senti even teaches a couple of them yoga. It feels like they're trying to make them feel like unique characters, but they weren't given any unique characteristics. So I'm not buying the adding to the disturbing nature of the show argument. If anything, it feels like they're trying to do the opposite. In the end, they just feel like they're meant to fill up space. They just feel pointless. To me, the most enjoyable moments in the show are where the 5 main characters talk, or form bonds with each other, or experience something disturbing. In my opinion, the show's most effective moments, its most emotional moments, its most disturbing moments, those only happen with the main 5 characters. Then why do the other characters take up so much screen time? I feel like we could have gotten a much more consistently enjoyable and effective show if we just focused on what worked. Every time these new characters come on screen, I'm just waiting for the next scene with the main 5. You know, the scenes that are the reasons why I actually like this show. Now, there is one moment where the show tries to have an emotional moment with the newer characters. It's in the final episode after Eri leaves everyone for 5 months, forcing them to survive off the land together. When he comes back to eliminate Backpack, everyone gathers around him as they wait for him to get eliminated and finally go back home. It feels like Backpack has grown so close to these people. They've formed bonds, and saying goodbye to them hurts so dearly. But I'm sitting here thinking, what bonds? We never really even see them have any meaningful interactions with him. I actually start to feel something when Senti walks on screen. She's a character he actually grew close to. She's the reason Backpack was sent back home after thinking about how much he suffered in the show. She learned to put her wants aside so she could help someone that deserved it more. And because of that, Backpack learned to accept help from people. That is something. What did any of these guys do for Backpack that came remotely close to that effect? Who knows? Maybe he did grow closer to some of those new characters during those 5 months, but then why? aren't we shown that? You can't have characters that have little to no personality and just expect me to sympathize with them. I'm sure that many people like lots of these characters, but I just can't get behind them. They just don't compare to the main five. The new characters should have either been disturbing and lifeless or actual characters. You can't have both. It has to be either one or the other. Alright, that's my biggest problem with the show. Here's a slightly smaller one. So in the show, there are two of what I assume to be dimensions. There's a dimension that's essentially Earth. It has normal humans and they do normal human things. This is the dimension where the newer contestants were taken from. Eri kind of just took some objects from the human dimension and gave those objects consciousness. But there's another dimension that's pretty much exactly like the human one, except for the fact that all humans are objects. There are some weirdly named buildings, but I'm pretty sure those were just due to laziness on the designer's side. From what we've seen, nothing else is different. They use the same technology, the architecture is the same, they pay rent, they can eat food at restaurants, they have jobs. They even have direct locations like San Francisco and its Golden Gate Bridge. So why are they objects? Making these characters objects doesn't seem to add anything to their world. I'm okay with fictional worlds with weird rules. I'm even okay with weird object worlds where some objects are sentient and some are just inanimate for whatever reason. That tells me that the world is wacky, it has its own weird rules, and it can do whatever it wants. It helps me take the show's world less seriously and to have fun with it more. I'm fine with that. Just as long as the show takes itself less seriously. What I'm not okay with is a world that's completely grounded in reality in pretty much every way, except for the fact that everyone's an object. That's not a wacky world that can do whatever it wants. Its rules are strictly realistic and the show is taking itself very seriously, except for the fact that everyone's an object. Why? In their world, they don't even call each other Backpack Candle or Magazine. No! Their actual names are Liam, Amelia, Taylor, Charlotte, Parker. What's the point of making them objects if it's never alluded to in their world? I mostly understand why they had to be objects in Eri's plain world. The show's audience has a lot of kids, so the deaths and injuries are much less gruesome and horrifying this way. So then why couldn't they just be people whose consciousness were put into objects? Eri can give objects a consciousness. Is it that far-fetched for him to transfer a consciousness from a human to an object? Completely grounding your world in reality only to break one huge rule for no good reason just destroys the world building. It just makes me ask questions, like if these objects are pretty much exactly like humans, then do they have vocal cords and digestive systems? Do they get fatter the more they eat? How do they lose weight? How is there a backpack in a world where there are no humans? Backpacks were invented by humans. Their designs were based off of a human body. So how does that work if there are no human bodies to base that design off of? We wouldn't have had any of these problems if this world was just a human world with humans. But I guess this human/object world is just something I have to try and pay no mind to if I want to enjoy the show more. I don't hate one. I know that may sound hard to believe after hearing all that, but I honestly don't hate it. There are so many things I legitimately like about this show. It has the potential to be something truly great. I mean, if anything, the strengths of the show make the flaws hurt it so much more. Because it's super disappointing to have an otherwise great show be dragged down so much by some frankly ridiculous problems. Many people treat this show like it's perfect, like it's an incredible masterpiece unlike any of which we've ever seen. But it's got problems, and it's okay to like the show despite these problems. But I don't think enough people acknowledge the show's issues. I always think it's important to do so because knowing what a show can do better can help us improve it in the future. We could have had a really good show because this show already has some of the most effective scenes I've ever witnessed in an object show. It's amazingly atmospheric. It's so fun to speculate about. And yet, as great as one can be, I can't say that the whole show is anything incredible. It was very ambitious, but the execution really could have been better. Primarily, it needs to focus more on what actually works in the story. Take time to expand on what works in your story instead of just having some little pointless distractions to take up time. Focus on the characters you actually want to focus on. If some characters don't add much to the story, you might want to leave them out. And while you're at it, try to make a world that somewhat stands on its own instead of just making a completely normal world with objects for little to no reason. That way your world can feel like a world, one that has good world building. And if these problems get solved, we could have a much better show on our hands. One holds a lot of promise, and I hope it learns from its mistakes and continues to grow in season 2. or whatever the continuation of the show is going to be called. I will be very upset if it's not called 2.